and we managed to track all those activities to that specific user to a point they were saying, hey, there is a threat here to the organization.
Welcome to Powered by Snowflake, where I interview technology leaders building applications and businesses on top of Snowflake. Today, we'll be learning about Securonix, a security operations and analytics platform built on Snowflake. And with me is Augusto Barros, Vice President of Cybersecurity Evangelist. Augusto, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you then?
Doing well, doing well. So in your own words, what is Securonix, and what is the integration point with it between Snowflake?
So Securonics, as you said, right, we are a security operations and analytics platform that essentially enables organizations to detect and respond to threats in an efficient manner. Right? So what they want to do, right, is detect threats that are affecting them as soon as possible and respond before there is impact, right? So for example, if you're thinking about ransomware, right, before kind of the ransomware is able to go and encrypt all the files, you are able to detect it and act to respond and contain it in a way that you avoid the impact. The way that we interact or that we integrate with Snowflake is using Snowflake data cloud capabilities to ingest and store the huge amounts of data that we need to handle for all the security use cases that we deliver in a cost-effective and efficient format. So that's kind of what Snowflake delivers to Securonix, to allows us to do our job in a most efficient manner.
Awesome. So tell me more about kind of how you personally got into this space and some of the history behind Securonix. When was it founded?
All right. So I've been working on security specifically for more than 20 years by now, and kind of had a crazy career going through end user organizations, doing the internal security job, and then went to consultant firms. And I spent quite a long time with Gartner. And while at Gartner, I was covering the security operations space, right? That would include technologies like Securonix. And that gave me kind of a very good position to watch the market. And it gave me also very special insight into what Securonix was doing. So that's where I decided to say, you know what, I want to join that company. They're doing a pretty good job in delivering threat detection and response. And hence I'm here. Now, within Securonix, my job is essentially, as we say, like cybersecurity evangelist. So I'm telling people what do we do and why we matter. And I think what Securonix does that is pretty interesting when you compare to some of our competitors is we are applying the advanced analytics in a way that will deliver the findings that the organizations are looking for in a way that they can triage less events and doing that in a faster way as well. So they can, we're always saying, right, react faster, but it's not necessarily only faster, it's more efficiently as well, right? You may end up reacting too fast to a false positive and cause harm. And so what we do is using all that advanced analytics to find better insights, less events with better information, better context. So the analyst, there's always going to be a human involved, right? We need to be very careful about the role of AI in all this, but we want to empower the human, right? So we use the AI or the machine learning and all the advanced analytics to empower the humans so they'll get less noise and we'll be able to act faster because they have all the information that they need.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So how big, is Securonix today?
Securonix was founded in 2009. We are approaching 1,000 employees, 850 last time we counted. And an interesting thing about our product is that it can be used by multiple industries, by any industry. And we also have content packs, right? Things about detecting threats that are specific to multiple industries as well.
So from here, I want to see a demo, right? Can you show me the secret sauce here?
Sure, of course. Let's take a look. Okay, so what we're seeing here, Daniel, is the architecture of Securonix integrated with Snowflake. And an important thing to mention about this architecture here is where we are adding value. Because when we talk about doing threat detection, many organizations end up with a dilemma of how they're going to approach the topic, right? They can buy what we call a SIEM, right? It is the type of technology that Securonix normally fits in, right? From a market description point of view. But the problem with most SIEMs is that they have very monolithic architecture, sometimes very old style data repositories, and you end up with another data silo, right? As Snowflake customers really try to fight, right? Against is yet another data silo. But these SIEMs have all the domain knowledge, security, and threat detection, right? So there is value there. On the other side, you have the option to get the data directly from your data sources, for example, server logs, network logs, and throw into a general purpose data management or data storage solution like Snowflake. But the problem then is what are you going to do with that data, right? Are you ingesting the data in a way that it's formatted, it's prepared properly to be used in a way that it is going to give you value, right? It's going to be useful for security. So you end up with these two different approaches that are not optimal. And what we do with Securonics and Snowflake is that we are putting these two together so you can get the benefits of both approaches, right? So when you look here on the left, you have the most diverse data sources that anyone can have in their organization, in their environment. So you ingest data from cloud services, AWS, Google, Azure, any type of SaaS applications as well. If you have Salesforce, if you have ServiceNow, and everything that you may have in a data center as well, right? If you're still kind of in a more traditional organization with network devices, etc., we're going to ingest data from all those. So we have all the collection infrastructure, and we're going to get all the data, and we're going to parse, we're going to format that in the most properly way, and you're going to enrich the data as well. What does it mean enriching the data, right? We are making the data more useful for the security needs that we're going to have, right? In terms of threat detection, investigations, threat hunting, as we like to call. So you're going to make the data optimized for that. And then we will do two things, right? I will store the data in Snowflake. So all the data will be useful for in the future, for any kind of investigation, back in time type of analysis. And I also, on the Securonix side, I'm going to apply all that advanced analytics that I mentioned before. Right? So you're going to look for anomalies, look for things that we know that are particular signs of threat behavior, and we'll generate alerts, or we're going to increase risk scores for certain users, for example. So the analyst in security operations group will be able to look at all that output and decide what to do and respond to those threats as well. If later they need to do anything like a retrospective investigation, they can go with our tool and have a search interface that they're very used to, because most security solutions have that. And when they're querying the data, we're going to go to Snowflake and get the data, and they can store as much as they want. Normally with a SIEM, there is a very hard challenge of storing data for a longer period, right? Because you have performance problems, we have huge cost problems with other SIEM solutions. But for us, because we're using Snowflake, we're able to solve those problems in a very elegant manner. The other part that is interesting here is we're putting all the data in Snowflake in a way that is available to any other data investigation or BI solution that you may want to use, right? So if you want to query that data or do any kind of additional data analysis with, for example, Tableau, we can go to that data that we stored there, and the data is well prepared, is enriched, as I'm going to show you more later, and you'll be able to use those tools to do these additional investigations. So there are organizations, for example, that will build a dashboard for security compliance for the multiple standards that they have, accessing the data that we collected, prepared, and stored in Snowflake.
That's an incredibly powerful platform that you've built, and it's cool to see how Snowflake is a core part of your tech stack. So that's really cool to see, and it's very informative to see the data sources that you're able to ingest and the different stages of your ingestion pipeline there. So that's cool to see.
Right. Yeah. Let me show you a bit more. Now, this is what normally kind of an analyst, right, in a security operations center will see when they are logging into Securonix, right? So we track multiple things in the organization's environment, right? So we kind of things that we call observables, right? Things that we are seeing that is happening, that are happening in the organization environment that may be worth investigating. We are tracking users or endpoints, right? Kind of like a desktop, for example, when tracking a risk level for them. Right? So if a user starts to do a lot of things that are suspicious, the risk level will increase, and the analyst can go there and investigate. And we also have, as you see here in the last box, we have what we call the threats, right? When we start seeing the combinations of multiple activities that look suspicious, we will generate a very specific alert for that situation, and the analyst can drill in and investigate. And so here, on this case, I'm seeing a specific user that has that anomalous behavior, that suspicious behavior. And when I go to investigate, I'm going to see that there is a threat scenario where there are multiple situations kind of that I'm seeing kind of an attack developing. So there is a situation when I see detection of a flight risk user, or someone that has been having odd behavior on web browsing. For example, they're browsing new career sites or defamation sites, kind of something like that. They may be doing activity that we call privilege escalation, right? In this case, for example, they're adding themselves to a privileged group. And we will see more of this suspicious behavior that goes toward a case where we may have, for example, data exfiltration, right? So they expanded their privileges, they hoarded data, and now they're sending data outside. And we managed to track all those activities to that specific user to a point they were saying, hey, there is a threat here to the organization.
So I see here, spike in number of files downloaded, right? How exactly are you defining that spike, and what technology are you using behind the scenes here?
That's a very good question, right? We like to say that Securonics uses a lot of advanced analytics, right? And that includes AI techniques like machine learning. And that's exactly what is in play here. And when you look, for example, account access and file share never accessed before. How do you know it has never been accessed before, right? Because you're tracking the behavior of that specific user. Same thing for the spike in number of files downloaded that you mentioned. Users will always be downloading files for the repositories, right? So I cannot just go and say, well, if you see anyone downloading more than 10, alert, that's going to generate a lot of what we call false positives. So what we do is our machine learning algorithms will keep dynamic profiles of users. So we know when there is a significant spike, we know that's an unusual situation, and that will trigger what we call a violation. But see that we're not only alerting because of this violation. This violation is being analyzed in context with other things that happened before and also that happened after. So that's kind of the power that we are applying all these analytics in a way that we're going to generate less alerts, but with far more context that will allow the analysts to reach out the conclusion about the situation faster and then kind of go and take action. So you see, for example, we even have a button here on top that is take action, where they can even trigger, for example, a response action, like blocking the user access, putting them in a group with restricted access to files and data. So we see kind of that we are a platform that will enable not only detection, but all the workflow. That's why we say security operations for detection and response.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, another thing that we do is, and I mentioned to you a big value from SIEM is we're going to be responsible for ingesting the data, right? The organization will not just grab all the data from the data sources and dump into Snowflake, right? We are doing that for them. And there is a friendly interface when the organization will set that up, right? So for example, here you see new data sources that are being discovered automatically by Securonix in your environment, right? So I'm seeing here certain Cisco devices, and I say, okay, I'm gonna collect data from the Cisco device. I can see the preview of the data that is being received by Securonix kind of from those devices. And when I start kind of setting up the data collection for this device, I go through a wizard interface where I'm going to define how this data is going to be parsed, right? So for example, here, I can see all the types of data or types of events that I can ingest from the assistants, and I can define for each one of them which one of those alerts I will ingest, which ones I may decide to not ingest because they're not noisy or not interesting. So I can make kind of very specific decisions about how this data will be ingested by my solution.
So that's pretty powerful. So when you're enriching your data, how many of these are part of that enrichment process, and how does that work exactly?
So when we talk about enrichment, there are many things that will happen here in the backend, right? And I think here is kind of another piece where Securonics brings a lot of value to your ability to ingest security data and store that in Snowflake. So what we can do, for example, is we can apply a set of different operations to the data before storing it. So for example, I can define an attribute called account name based on certain fields and certain kind of pieces of information in that log, right? The log may not have, for example, the name of the user, may have just an account name. But when I'm going to store that data in Snowflake, I'm going to look at all the identity metadata that I have available into Securonix, because I can also ingest enrichment and context data from other sources like Active Directory, human resources databases, for example, and I can see that the account AB1234 is the user Augusto Barros, and I will add that information to the data that I'm storing in Snowflake. So later, if I want to search for things that were done by Augusto Barros, I don't need to know the account name that Augusto was using for that specific device. But I already did that as part of this enrichment process. So you see, all these attributes that I'm creating here as part of the enrichment process are the result of operations that I am performing on top of the data that is being ingested.
When building and developing a platform like this on top of Snowflake, what was your decision process? Like, how did you choose and decide to build this on top of Snowflake?
There are multiple factors, right? Of course, there is the business factor involved. An interesting thing to mention, right? Kind of Capital One Investments is one of the investors in Securonics and Snowflake as well. So we end up being cousins, kind of in a certain way here. And Snowflake also provides a data platform for us that fits very well into our needs, but also in our architecture and how we approach the problem that we propose to solve, right? So Securonics has always taken the approach of being a cloud native solution. And for us, it makes a lot of sense to also use a cloud native data platform to use as the backend for us, right? Because we have this very strong emphasis on being a cloud native solution. I think the cloud nature characteristic of Snowflake makes us very similar into our approach to the problems that we're proposed to solve. Another thing that is very interesting with Snowflake is on the cost side. Most organizations, when they're dealing with the problem of a SIEM, right, of ingesting data from security and doing threat detection, they have this dilemma of how much data I can ingest, right? So it'll give me more visibility into what's going on in my environment without just exploding my budget because it's just too much data to handle, right? But Snowflake is very cost effective. So it ends up enabling us to offer to our customers something that will be cost effective to the point that will not affect their ability to do threat detection in the most effective way.
So in a platform like this, it seems like there's always going to be evolving methods and ways to better diagnose or analyze threats. What is kind of in the roadmap over the next 6 to 12 months for Securonics?
Right. We've been doing a lot of interesting things with the data that we have available to us, right? So one of the things that we've been working on is what we call the autonomous threat sweeper. Right? So for example, we get all this data and we put in storage, but we may learn about a threat that was around that were affecting certain organizations 2 months ago, but we're only going to learn about that tomorrow. So what are you going to do? If you're doing threat detection, you're going to look at the signals about those threats. We normally call those indicators of compromise, and you're going to start looking at data that is flowing in for those signals, but you won't see it because the threat, right, that activity happened 2 months ago. So what we are doing with Autonomous Threat Sweeper is, as we get this type of information on the back end, we do this retrospective analysis on behalf of our customers. They don't need to do that on their own. So that saves a huge amount of time for the security operations teams, right? Because we are getting all that what we call the threat intelligence, and we are doing that type of retrospective analysis for them. So that's something that we already do in our base platform, and we'll be extending that to this Snowflake-enabled solution as well in the near future. We are also working in different ways to combine all these different what you call violations in a more dynamic manner. Right? So we are seeing, okay, in certain customers here, we are seeing these number of violations are normally seen together. So there is a certain threat scenario that makes these things happen together very often. Our solution will learn that in a very dynamic manner and start applying that pattern in other places, to other customers as well. So that allows us to in a very dynamic manner, learn and adapt to what is happening on the threat landscape.
That's awesome. I know in a platform like this, context is critical, right? The more context that you're able to have, the better insights you're able to have on the data. How does Securonics plan to leverage maybe third-party data from the Snowflake data marketplace?
One thing that we always do, right, as part of the enrichment process is we can get any type of data set and use that as part of the enrichment process. So for example, if you're ingesting certain logs from your infrastructure, from your cloud infrastructure, for example, and that's related to certain business application that is putting the data in Snowflake, I can use that data set to enrich my data that is coming from the infrastructure. So when you're looking at those infrastructure records, you know what components or sometimes which transactions from your business application they refer to. Right? We can ingest it from any data source, and of course, if that's in Snowflake, it becomes even easier. Our customers also are going to start just now, they're starting to look at all the opportunities that they have when they got all this security enriched data into Snowflake together with their business data. And some of them, for example, are starting to build compliance monitoring dashboards where they will get information, for example, about their internal structure, for example, the business units, and they will map to the risk levels that we are tracking from the events from Securonix. So they can say, for example, which business units within the organization have the highest risk levels. And so they are combining the security data set that is in Snowflake with the data related to their organization, to their business, and putting those together in dashboards that are building, for example, in Tableau or any type of other BI solution that they decided to use.
That's awesome. So for our viewers here today, if they want to learn more about Securonix, where should they go?
They should go to Securonix.com. They're going to find a lot of information there, including webinars that we've done together with Snowflake, going in depth about kind of how this architecture works, what are the benefits, all the use cases, the threat models, and all, including kind of news about the threats that we are researching, that we are learning more about. So there's a lot of information there to know more, not only about Securonics and Snowflake, but also about all the threat scenario and threat landscape that we have to deal with.
And I want to say thank you, Augusto, for joining me today. It's been great learning about how Securonix is powered by Snowflake. And for everybody that's watching here, if you're looking to learn more how you can build your business or your application on top of Snowflake, check out developers.snowflake.com. Thanks.